Okay, I think we'll get started. We have a packed house here tonight. Good evening. Can you hear everyone hear me in the back? Okay, perfect. Good evening, and thank you all for coming tonight. I'm sure you noticed all the media is talking about is about something intelligent. The intelligent TV, the intelligent refrigerator, the intelligent phone. And sure, it's nice to make appliances work better. Nothing wrong with that. But aren't there really more important things that should be intelligent and therefore work better? Surely, safety and security should be at the top of the list. And for that, we have intelligence. So the real question is, how intelligent is our intelligence? And to answer it, we would need, wouldn't you agree, a really intelligent person. Well, this is why we're so fortunate to have today one of the most qualified, one of the most intelligent persons in the intelligence field, Robert David Steele. But let me first welcome you to Viewpoint's 9th event and to our second following the election of President Trump. I'm Erica Stein, and together with Laura Jacobs, we welcome you here tonight. And I'd like to thank Dan Mahoney for his efforts in making this event possible. This is the second lecture of Viewpoint's 2020 Vision series, where we discuss key prospects for policies and politics and how we can imagine events unfolding over the next 4 years. And tonight, nothing could be more timely, more topical, than to focus on what's been going on during the nascent Trump presidency. A politically inexperienced, unconventional, and I believe we can all agree on this, impulsive president was legitimately elected by the people who voted in a disruptor, someone to shake up the system. And now we're seeing the results in the ensuing chaos that has been playing out before our eyes every day and every night. But maybe, just maybe, could it be the deep state getting back at the outsider, especially if he's not a professional politician? And this is what we'd like to discuss this evening. So tonight, we're very fortunate to have with us Robert David Steele, a former top CIA intelligence officer. He is so well regarded in this field and beyond that he was recommended for this year's Nobel Peace Prize. A former Marine Corps infantry officer, Robert is also the author of many books, including the open source Everything Manifesto, Transparency, Truth, and Trust. As an intelligence operative, he managed a false flag operation, and for this reason, among others, Robert is perfectly familiar with the deep state and the role of the CIA in supporting it. In 2012, he ran for the Reform Party presidential nomination, and he was a proponent of the 12-point Electoral Reform Act, which he will discuss this evening. I guess you can say that Robert was an honorary hacker, too. Well, he was praised for this by none other than Alvin Toffler. In 1994, he wrote the first warning letter to the White House on cybersecurity. And fast forwarding to now, in order to counter Google's hyper-dominance, he is imagining a new internet infrastructure. Please join me in welcoming Robert David Steele. Let me just go over the format for this evening. Robert will speak for about 35 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions for about 30 minutes, and then we'd like to end close to 8 o'clock. Okay, thank you. Robert.
And then I'll stay for as long as anyone has any questions. My record is 8 hours and 1 minute. Set here in New York City at Hackers on Planet Earth in 2010. I'll never do that again. I then bought a pack of Red Bull and drove back to Virginia. It was really stupid. All right, well, God bless Donald Trump. God bless Donald Trump. I cannot say that often enough. Now, I'm a son of New York. I was born in Oceanside Hospital. My grandfather worked for Humboldt Pipe, which was part of Exxon. My father worked for Exxon. I grew up overseas as the son of an OBRAT, but I've never left New York, and New York has never left me. However, all of you know more about Donald Trump and all of his flaws than I do. So, accepting all of his flaws, God bless Donald Trump, because he opened our people's minds to the fact that there is a deep state, to the fact that we have a fake news media, including the crap news network. And I don't think much of Fox either, with the exception of Judge Napolitano and Tucker Carlson, maybe Brett Baier. I mean, 3 morons in the morning and 5 morons at night. This does not make my day. So Donald Trump, and I've written the Trump Revolution series at Amazon. It's a series of 8-page papers, and it's also free online, okay? Everything I've ever written is free online, with the exception of the Open Source Everything Manifesto, which a publisher owns. But I own it in foreign language rights. It's been translated into Chinese and Spanish and so forth. What Donald Trump did that nobody has ever done before was actually get everyone to understand that we have a rigged system. It is a totally rigged system. It's a politically rigged system. It's an academically rigged system. It is a financially rigged system. It's also a culturally rigged system. And I just watched, I think Cynthia McKinney is one of the goddesses of American society and politics, and she just did a video in which she pointed out that all of the evil things that white people are feeling today were first practiced on black people. All right? This is like the old appeasement of Hitler. You appease them and hope that you'll be eaten last. Well, they've arrived. Okay? So it's time for all of us to come together. And last night I had the pleasure, because of Erica and Dan's influence, of having a dinner in which we brought together the alt-right, or pop-right, as some like to call it, and a couple of leaders from the black community. And my hope here is to launch today, We the People, Unity for Integrity. And it is not a political party. It is the 99% against the 1%. It is the Main Street against Wall Street. It is the honest people against the dishonest people. I think we can win. I really think that this summer we can occupy the front lawns and the home offices of every member of Congress and say to them very clearly, you signed the Integrity Pledge and you agree to introduce the Election Reform Act in September when you return from summer recess, or we're going to turn you into a large pile of pus. I think we can do this. Now, I can't do this. You can do this. Therefore, I'm only here to announce the idea. So let me set this up. And I don't want to go into great detail on things that I've written about extensively, but the bottom line here is Donald Trump is an accidental president and also a fringe president. He's a fringe president just like Barack Obama was, because he was elected by 27% of the eligible voters. Barack Obama was elected by 26% of the eligible voters. 47% did not vote at all in this election. All right? I tried desperately to reach Donald Trump from election day on to explain to him that he had to reach out to the 26% that hated him and the 47% that did not vote at all. I couldn't get through Reince Priebus. Reince Priebus is a traitor. Reince Priebus is the epitome of the rigged system. Reince Priebus and Paul Ryan and probably Mike Pence represent the rigged system. They represent the Bush family, they represent Dick Cheney, Bob Gates, all of these people who are the establishment.
You mean Bill?
Who?
Bill Gates?
Yes, also, absolutely. Bill Gates is, no, stop it, okay, stop it. Bill Gates is sterilizing people all over the world, okay? So this establishment is very evil. But let me get back to my videotaped announcement here. So Trump was elected by a fringe, but unlike Barack Obama, he was not the deep state choice. He was the outsider, the outcast, the wild card. They panicked. They went into full coup mode. We had a coup in the United States of America, a soft coup. John Brennan, who is a Saudi whore and a traitor to the United States of America, worked with a number of people to create these lies about the Russians hacking the election. The Russians did not hack the election. I'm one of 26 people that basically killed that story. And since we're in New York, I can tell you it gave me great pleasure to tear John Brennan a new asshole. Okay? The man deserves to be wiped out. Everybody is cyber snooping. I introduced NSA to hackers in 1993 to my eternal shame. I was the first speaker at Hackers on Planet Earth here in New York City in 1994. I co-sponsored the first hacking cyber security conference with Win Schwartau in about 1992. I wrote the warning letter to the White House in 1994, and what they did was they said to NSA, protect American communications and computing. And NSA instead went to the CEOs of Dell, this is all documented, Dell, IBM, Hewlett-Packard, Microsoft, a number of others, and every one of these CEOs violated their fiduciary duty to the American public and to their stockholders and their stakeholders, and they allowed NSA to put in infantile backdoors that were easier to crack than the existing security. NSA created the Chinese and Russian hacking industries by exciting all their teenagers with the ease with which American communications and computing could be hacked. If you buy an American computer, you're an idiot, because NSA has it totally, totally open, including the latest Intel chip has a little NSA chip inside of it. That's all been documented, okay? So what happened here was John Brennan tried to flip the Electoral College with these lies. This is the equivalent of jury tampering on a constitutional level scale, and that failed. So then they started pressuring Trump, and Christine Austin Fitz has done a good job of this, of talking about how they really, Trump's an alpha male, so they've gone after every one of his women. They've done everything they can to make Trump lose his head, lose his sanity. And part of the second coup that is going on now is they're trying to get Trump on videotape acting irrational, so that traitor Priebus and possible traitor Pence can go to Congress and say the president is irrational. The president should be taken out of office under the 25th Amendment, all right? We have a coup going on in the United States of America right now, and the New York Times is central to that coup d'etat. The New York Times is a treasonous organization that everybody should boycott. There's nothing worthwhile in the New York Times. The same is true of Time Magazine. The same is true of Time Magazine. Massimo Calabresi and I used to know each other back in the day. He's turned into a pimp for the CIA. Every article he's written in Time Magazine has been written in theory by the CIA, including his cover story on Russians hacking the election. Okay? So that's where we're at. We have Donald Trump alone, possibly compromised, wandering the White House at night alone in his bathrobe. He doesn't drink, thinking about who he can call at 2 in the morning and looking for cockroaches. This is not a great life, okay? We need to rescue our president. Our president is in enemy hands. Now, the question becomes, how do we do this? I'm not a political person. I mean, my dream in life is to run the Trump channel and the open source agency and actually restore truth. I mean, it's funny because I was at the National Intelligence Agency in Thailand. I was shooting a documentary with Steven Seagal, and they found out I was in town, and a whole bunch of people got a little piece of me. But I ended my lecture to the National Intelligence Agency in Thailand by saying, you know, I love the craft of intelligence. And I would remind everybody of that scene in the James Bond movie where M says to James Bond, he says, James, we need you back. And James, as he's walking his way, says, ma'am, I never left. Okay? I have never left America or our government or the intelligence community. I've simply kept my integrity. And that cannot be said for everybody else in the U.S. government and the U.S. intelligence community today. So what is the deep state? One of the things that frustrates me is that people think that the deep state is just unelected bureaucrats. It's not. It starts with the Rothschilds and the Vatican. And they control the City of London and Wall Street. And they personally appoint every head of every central bank around the world, and they appoint most heads of most banks across all countries. Okay? They are not to be confused with the 9 million loyal American Jews that we have in the United States of America. 9 million Jews out of 150 to 200 million voters are not the source of influence in the United States of America, okay? So please do not misunderstand me. I love the state of Israel. I want a safe and secure Israel, but I also want to stop the atrocities against the Palestinians. I want to create an international city. I want Jerusalem and Mecca to be international cities. It's time we put Saudi Arabia back in a really small box. Okay? They are the greatest source of evil in the Middle East, in my humble opinion. So what is the deep state? It's actually financial people controlling political people who control media and academic people who control you. And every decision that is made in Washington today is made against the public interest and in favor of the 1%. All right? So it's time we say, as they said in Egypt, enough. And that's why I say, God bless Donald Trump. God bless Donald Trump. I cannot say it often enough. Because with or without Trump or Sanders, and I'm sorry for those of you that love Bernie Sanders, but he's a sheepdog for Hillary Clinton. Okay, the People's Party is sheepdog 2.0. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited about bringing together, I hope, the people of color with the alt-right, pop-right, is because then we can bring in the Latinos, the Greens and Libertarians, and then at that point, we can go to the alt-left, pop-left, and say, look, you can either follow the sheepdog or you can come over here and be part of this larger movement. Now let me tell you about the political landscape of America. 17% are controlled by the Democrats. 13% are controlled by the Republicans. Another 20% are the small parties and activist independents. And 50% have dropped out. 50% of our country no longer participates because they know it's a rigged system. So Cynthia and I are using the hashtag #UNRIG. And I'm very pleased to say it's in the top 3 on any search right now. But with your help, maybe we can move it up to the top 1. #UNRIG. UNRIG. Not unrigged, but unrigged. So what is an Electoral Reform Act? After running for president, I found out we had 8 accredited political parties. I had no idea. What that means is these parties are eligible for matching federal funding. I will list them because they were new to me. Constitution, Virgil Goode. Green, Jill Stein and Cynthia McKinney back in the day. Libertarian, Gary Wetson-Aleppo Johnson. I mean, how stupid, I'm a libertarian, by the way. So let me say, having said I'm a libertarian, let me say, how stupid do you have to be as a party to elect 2 old white guys, one of whom has lost half his brain to drugs, okay? This is idiocy. So it's time for the Libertarian Party to get a grip on reality, and I tried very hard to get the Libertarians and the Greens to run a joint candidacy with a coalition cabinet and a balanced budget announced in advance. Under the circumstances that we had, they could have won, but they didn't want to listen. Okay, so God bless Donald Trump. We have Donald Trump. What do we do with Donald Trump? We try to help him. And I have tried very hard to work through several people that know Steve Bannon, and I've tried to reach Trump, and I have a memorandum for the president that's been read by 3 million people. I'm told it's been read by Trump and Bannon, but they made the mistake of thinking that the Republican Party was going to stay in power through 2018. It will not. If we don't have an Election Reform Act, the Democrats will take the House, and if we have a major pedophilia scandal and lose 6 senators, 1 has already left, Chavez. If we lose 6 senators, the Democrats can take the Senate, in which case they can not only impeach the president, they can also convict him. Donald Trump is on very thin ice. And I personally believe that the ideas that I've articulated for him, including a Trump channel, his new website is crap, okay? It's just a vanilla kind of old website. Here's what I want you to know, with no two-way dialogue. He needs poll mole. Pollmall.vote. I'm very high on that because he can then do a trumpet, get back 150 million answers on a single presidential dashboard that is sorted by congressional district and so forth. All right? And he needs an open source agency. He needs a counterintelligence search. I'll tell you a secret. The National Security Agency only processes 1% of everything it collects, but it has collected everything for the last 10 years. in the National Security Agency databases are every email and every cell phone call every pedophile has made in the United States of America in the last 10 years. I hope they're not in the process of destroying them. Because the problem that we have is that NSA does not provide support to the FBI or to the clandestine service. When I was chasing terrorists overseas, I couldn't get NSA to provide support to me at the tactical level. A bottle of scotch got me 15 hits for one day. And then the guy said, sorry, you're not a priority. Okay? So our system is completely broken. But going back to this Election Reform Act, there are 12 things that have to be done together. And one of the problems that I have with people who mean well, like Christina Tobin of Free and Equal, and Lawrence Lessig, who was an active traitor. Lawrence Lessig actually went to hide out in Iceland during the Electoral College. And from Iceland, he was telling people he would support them if they flipped their vote, okay? So a traitor hiding in Iceland, that's Lawrence Lessig. The 12 things that need to be done together. You can't just do campaign reform or ballot access reform. You have to do 12 things together. And I will just list them and then wrap up with a truth and reconciliation theme and where Cynthia and I would like to see us go beyond Trump and Sanders. Number one is universal registration, and the prisoners don't lose their vote, by and large. We have put more black people in jail under the Clinton crime bill than there were slaves at the beginning of the Civil War. This is an absolute outrage. It's,
number one, individuals being
yes.
executed in this country.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Thank you, Anita. Number two, free and equal ballot access. The two-party tyranny makes it impossible, with the exception of the Libertarian Party, for others to get on ballot access. And you have rising parties like the Justice Party with Rocky Anderson and the Working Families Party with Bill de Blasio that really cannot go national. We could burn him at effigy later, but the whole idea is a good one. Okay, tightly drawn districts, gerrymandering, of course. Cynthia McKinney was executed by the two-party tyranny. Her district was destroyed, and we need to do better about that. We also have to consider the possibility of floating congressmen. The elderly and the gays may need congressmen because they don't live in single districts. And I don't offer all of this as a prescription, take it or leave it. I'm trying to start a national conversation. So these are all ideas from others that I've aggregated that I just want to throw out there. Okay, public funding of political campaigns, because right now USA Today has listed the 40 billionaires that own the US Congress, listed them by name. Free media access. Every media outlet uses some form of public charter or public telecommunications capability, and therefore we have a right as the people who provide those to demand that they offer in their civic duty a modicum of openness. Okay? Open primaries and end superdelegates. I have to make a confession to you. I never thought Donald Trump would win, so before I approached Donald Trump, I approached Bernie Sanders. 8 times. 8 times Bernie Sanders was offered a chance to introduce the Election Reform Act in Congress. Had he done so, he might be president today. Goodbye, Bernie Sanders. Holiday and free public transport. We make it very hard for impoverished people and people with handicaps and others to vote, and that's deliberate. There's a lot of voter suppression going on, not just black, but also white in certain districts. Paper ballots counted publicly on site. The debold machines were designed for fraud. Yes. Every electronic voting machine today is designed for fraud by the owners of the machine, and most of them, not all of them, are hackable remotely. Okay? Hillary Clinton stole 13 primaries from Bernie Sanders with electronic vote tampering. Hillary Clinton hacked the election, not Vladimir Putin. Okay? And I find it amazing that Time Magazine and Crap News Network and the New York Times are so blatantly against the public interest and unwilling to tell the truth about anything. Instant runoff. Right now, the system is rigged so that you can run 10 candidates and have a candidate win with 20% of the vote. But instant runoff would allow you to vote for your first, second, and third choices, so that ultimately the aggregate candidate, the candidate who has the most total points across the public, would be elected. I want not only a coalition cabinet announced, but coalition debates, and we need to take debates back from the debate commission, which stole them from the League of Women Voters. Now, I'm very disappointed in the League of Women Voters, because if I were president of the League of Women Voters and the two-party tyranny stole the debates from me, I would announce there will be no sex in America until we get the debates back. This is real simple. What don't you understand? Okay? So the League of Women Voters gave up their integrity when they allowed the two-party tyranny to steal the debates. And I'm very upset by that, because I think very, very highly of the League of Women Voters. They were the epitome of what good civic citizenship and responsibility and representation is all about. Finally, we have to repeal Taft-Hartley 14B. I am a good friend of Del Spurlock, who was the Deputy Secretary of Labor. He's a man of color under Ronald Reagan, and he and I have breakfast regularly. And we have agreed that until you restore democracy in the workplace, you cannot have democracy in the Capitol. So we have to make unions possible again. We have to give our workers their voice and vote at the working level, not just at the meta level, nationally. Now that's more or less the 12 points, and if you go to hashtag UNRIG, #UNRIG, you'll get to all of this, including some cool graphics and a wonderful forward that Cynthia sent me this morning from Bangladesh, where Dr. McKinney is teaching. I would love to raise the money to bring her back. I have this vision of Donald Trump barnstorming the country, which he does so well, accompanied by Cynthia McKinney and Dennis Kucinich and Ralph Nader and Jesse Ventura and me, creating crowds of 50,000, but crowds that are not lily white, crowds that are white and black and red and yellow and brown, okay? We have got to bring all of us together. And that's why this movement is not a party. And it's also not my movement. Frankly, I told Brother King last night, you've got the baton, brother. It's got to come out of all of you. And I think the next big move, because the alt-right is already angry at Donald Trump. The Syrian missiles, and today we attacked Syrian forces. Today we bombed Assad's forces. And oh, by the way, if you didn't know this, ISIS was created by the United States of America in partnership with Saudi Arabia. Okay, so Donald Trump is being just a tad hypocritical here. And he's allowing James Mattis and Herbert McMaster, please call him Herbert, it pisses him off, and I like that. Herbert is a vastly overrated general. He is not a strategic thinker, and he is a traitor. I have it from a source inside the highest levels of Washington that Herbert McMaster, John McCain, and John Brennan co-conspired to get Saudi Arabia and Israel to pay the green helmets to do the false flag attack that was held recently, okay? The white helmets, yes, thank you. And that device, there's an MIT professor that has done a very fine report. That device was an improvised ground-level device, and it was not a sarin gas attack. Now, if I were advising Donald Trump, Herbert McMaster would be headed back to the Army for court-martial and early retirement. In fact, he was about to get fired until he blew in Donald's ear and got the job. We don't need a National Security Council. A National Security Council is Dick Cheney's foothold in the White House. It's the neoconservative family, it's the Clinton family, it's the Bush family, it's the Rothschilds, it's the Vatican in the White House. What we need in the White House is a National Strategy Council, lowercase, more like senior clerks, not like czars, who advise the president on addressing all threats, all policies, with true cost economics all of the time. So let me end with a note on truth and reconciliation. I get pushback from people because you all remember the Franklin scandal, which was the pedophilia scandal in Nebraska, and you all remember what was called Spotlight about the Vatican Church in Boston. It's clearly established that elements of the Catholic Church, if not the Catholic Church itself, have been taking children from unwed mothers and selling them into pedophilia. Okay? I'm very sorry to say this, but you need to get a grip on reality. Reality bats last. Okay? So I'm your tongue depressor today. We just had an Irish Catholic organization where 800 child's bodies were found in a cemetery in Ireland. All right? These children are being executed by the Catholic Church because they're inconvenient children. Now, this is real outrage. But what we have coming forward here, I think WikiLeaks is going to do to Republican pedophiles at the highest levels what they did to Democratic pedophiles at the John Podesta level. Okay? This is going to turn the Senate. Now, why truth and reconciliation? I'm an admirer of Nelson Mandela, although he didn't go far enough. He should have taken away the gold mines and the nuclear arms and all of the wealth that was ill-gotten. But truth and reconciliation makes sense. As a counterintelligence officer, I will tell you that if you are going to abuse and hang the first 1,000 that you catch, they're not going to tell you much, and you're not going to get the other 9,000. We have, by my estimation, about 10,000 major pedophiles in the United States of America at the elite level, running all the way from Boston through Washington down to Miami, across to New Orleans, Chicago, and then Beverly Hills, which has its own pedophile taxi service. And the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department has its pedophile symbol on its badge. You're safe with us, elite pedophile. This is outrageous stuff. So why truth and reconciliation? Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions have successfully arrested, it is said, 3,000 pedophiles at the lower levels. That's how you begin a national level RICO racketeering kind of investigation and exercise. One of the reasons I think James Comey was fired is because he is probably, if not a Knight of Malta, certainly anointed by the Pope and a very, very loyal Catholic who was slow rolling the investigations against Clinton and against the pedophiles. Okay? So in my view, truth and reconciliation is how we get everybody to talk, how we roll up the entire network, and how we then educate the public so that we can be more alert now. I mean, children are more profitable than drugs. There are four-man teams all over this country where the woman says to the mother, "Oh, please, can I hold your child?" And then her alleged husband is the blocker who stops the mother when she runs away with the child. Then there's an observer, and finally there's the getaway driver. Okay? So children are being snatched across this country. 1 million children across this country on an annual basis. I mean, it's just absolutely outrageous. And one final really ugly negative note. These children are not just being kidnapped for sex. They're being kidnapped for body parts and bone marrow harvesting and blood drinking. I don't know if any of you have seen how the Chinese boil dogs. A boiled dog has adrenalized blood. The dog is terrified. So imagine a boiled child and then someone drinking their adrenalized blood. Now, I don't want to go any further with that, but the bottom line is I want you to understand that you're living in a dream. The mainstream media is the Matrix. They are painting a picture for you that is completely false. But I consider it an honor to be here with you. And I believe that there is nothing wrong with America the Beautiful that cannot be fixed and fixed fast by restoring integrity to our government. So I offer you truth and reconciliation. I hope that we can have a national conversation. And frankly, it's not for me to lead. It's for this to take on a life of its own. Hashtag UNRIG. God bless Donald Trump and God bless America.
Okay, thank you, Robert. We'll open it up for questions now. Before you ask your question, please wait for the microphone. Please stand up, state your name, and make your question very brief. And please make sure it's a question and not a statement.
Right, no statements. I will mock you if you make a statement.
Okay, all right.
Anita, you got to control it.
I will.
Thank you. Love you.
My name is,
Others read.
okay, shall I start? My name is Nellie Hester Bailey. I would like you to comment on the editorial piece of David Brooks that appeared in the New York Times, that was in the fall of last year, in which he predicted that Trump would be forced to resign or he would be impeached. Brooks later on that same day of his editorial, appeared on a radio station, and he said, "Oh, I forgot to add assassinated." And if you could give your comments on that.
David Brooks is a slut. He works for the deep state. I don't bother to read him, but he is useful for what the CIA narrative is. And that's been the narrative from the moment they realized that Trump could actually win. Now remember, the Democrats did this to themselves because they rigged the system so that Hillary Clinton was certain. And a number of things knocked Clinton out at the very end. Among them, white hats came in and stopped the electoral theft. You had the New York Police Department leaking from the Anthony Weiner thing, and you had the spaz attack at the 9/11 memorial, where she spazzes out and falls flat on her face into her emergency. Her van is actually a disguised hospital. Okay, so I think David Brooks is the perfect ass licker for the deep state. Mouthpiece, thank you. You are so much more gracious, diplomatic, and polite than I am. Another question. Over here, this lady, and then this gentleman, and then in the back. Ma'am, behind you.
Yeah. Are you suggesting that this deep state problem is unique in history? Have we had any?
No, it's gone all through history. It goes all the way back to the East India Company and the royal family in England. So the deep state has always existed. The genius of the Rothschilds was to realize that if they could get governments to be stupid enough to let them run central banks, they could run everything. Central banks need to be nationalized.
I'm just wondering also, is Hillary's resistance movement, which seems to be like a unique thing, trying to give legitimacy to the people who behave in the deep state? And
I think the resistance movement against Trump is a seditious movement that is subject to legal action. I predicted a violent American spring after Berkeley, and I think George Soros has been informed he will be assassinated if he keeps going with this nonsense. So somebody stopped the violent American spring. Because one of the things that people don't realize is that Berkeley happened because the president of Berkeley University, the mayor of the city, and the governor of the state all wanted that violence to happen. Okay? Had I been the scene commander, those people would have been rounded up, everybody dressed in black would have been isolated, and we would have had a very long, deep conversation about who put them up to it. Okay? So another question here, sir. Yes, the microphone coming. And then there was a gentleman way in the back, if you want to go find him.
Yes, my name is Howard Samara. I would like to know if you consider the CIA the Fed's army.
That's a great question. First off, there are 7 CIAs, not 1. And I've published this. You can look it up, 7 CIAs. So you have a Wall Street CIA, and you all have to remember, CIA was created by Wall Street. I really recommend David Talbot's book, The Devil's Chessboard. Everything Donald Trump is experiencing today at the hands of the CIA and the deep state, John F. Kennedy experienced at the hands of Allen Dulles, the CIA and the deep state. Okay, so I know people give me a hassle when I say Trump is like Kennedy, but there are in fact a lot of similarities, including the fact that Putin is a more loyal, useful friend to Trump than Trump's own generals. John F. Kennedy had a back channel with Khrushchev, and they agreed that they trusted each other more and that their greatest threat to peace was their own generals. Okay? So this deep state is really in a mess. It's not that the CIA is the Fed's army, because the Fed is also the best of the servant class. You really have to see the Rothschilds, the Vatican, 12 families, and then all of the banks, and then the secret intelligence agencies and the central banks. Those are the best of the servant class. They're not actually in control of anything. And 90% of them are just doing their job. 10% of them are deeply engaged in treason at all times, including the FBI. I mean, the FBI is a theatrical agency. The FBI does not actually do much for our country, or it would have taken down the 900 traders that we have, or the 500 traders we have across the federal government. So what you do have, and you may have read John Perkins' Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I'm also reading a great book on how the Great Depression was essentially not only allowed to happen, but encouraged to happen. Bankers never lose. They always bet short and they ride it down, and what it always ends up, every economic collapse, and Martin Armstrong has never been wrong. We are going to have an economic collapse in September of this year, and they're already starting to blame Donald Trump for it. I've been watching a few pieces of media, and there's some moron out there saying that people have no confidence in Trump, therefore the economy is going to collapse. He's a lying asshole, okay? Because basically, the economy is going to collapse because of the way that Wall Street has mismanaged the economy in favor of the 1% and against the 99%. So Donald Trump is blameless. Now, Trump has his problems. His health plan and his tax plan are both frauds. They are absolutely dishonest documents. Because he has surrounded himself with people that don't tell him the truth. And I pray for Donald Trump. God bless Donald Trump. He's got enormous potential. We need to save him. Back in the back there.
Steve.
In the way back. No, wait. In the way back. If you're holding the microphone, you have the right to speak.
Steve Giblin. Okay, I've read everything that J.B. Thu and Benedict and Francis has written. Could you elaborate a little bit on this Vatican conspiracy that you have?
Well, it's not a conspiracy. I mean, we had a post once on 33 conspiracy theories proven true. And CIA invented, I turned down a job with covert action staff. I actually have a gift for covert action and false flag stuff, and I don't like it. So I turned my back on it. But CIA invented the term conspiracy theorist in order to diminish the people who were telling the truth about the JFK assassination. John F. Kennedy was assassinated by CIA under Allen Dulles' instructions with the joyous cooperation of pedophile J. Edgar Hoover, founder of the FBI, and the approval of Lyndon Baines Johnson, the most crooked politician in history up until Hillary Clinton, with the active participation, I'm sorry to say, of the Bush family. George W. Bush Sr. was part of the deal, and Howard Hunt was part of the deal. So I have completely lost my train of thought. What was your question? Oh, conspiracy theorists. Okay, conspiracy theorists. Now, fast forward to today. Wait. Okay, I'll come to the Vatican, but fast forward to today because CIA created the fake news me to try and put down the alternative media, and we ended up flipping it back at them. Bottom line is the Vatican's gift was to put Jesuits into the chambers of kings and queens and to use the confessional as an intelligence service. Okay? I mean, I don't know myself directly. Fine, you can think it's a stretch, and then when you've read my 12 books, you can tell me I'm wrong. I don't know that, but I do know that the power of the Vatican is so great.
Well, that's a huge assumption.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I don't care.
There must be some documents or some.
Yes, there are, and you're welcome to go find them. I'm not going to spend time spoon feeding you. Next question. Sir, with all due respect, I've made a statement. You can take it or leave it. Next question. Is it on?
Hello? Okay.
Yes.
Hi. I'd like to know how you feel about the current Comey firing and that whole...
You know, I thought Comey could be saved because he did the right thing when he said the Clinton investigation had been reopened. But the reality is that Comey has been so tight with the Rothschild family. I mean, he was on the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation board back in the day. And that Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation is the original East India banking family coming forward. I really think there is good in everyone. Donald Trump right now is being screwed. Let me come forward to Mueller. Mueller is a traitor. Mueller covered up 9/11 for Dick Cheney. 9/11 was done by Dick Cheney. 13 countries warned us in advance. Dick Cheney declared hallelujah. He declared a national counterterrorism exercise 3 months in advance for the day of 9/11. All 3 buildings were taken down by controlled demolitions. AIG had all the fireworks and the Hollywood theatrics set up in advance. The Israelis spent a year deepening the channel so that they could destroy the crime scene. Rudy Giuliani led the destruction of the crime scene. Okay? Our firefighters, the families of 9/11, they all got it immediately.
Many were fired over that.
I'm sorry to hear that. And many were also sent to their early deaths with cancer. And George Bush, when he told the New Yorkers that it's safe to return to the city, was a dolt, a misinformed dolt. So every New Yorker was breathing in asbestos for a couple of weeks, which, by the way, that was an insurance fraud. 9/11 was an insurance fraud. Insurance companies are not so stupid as to accept 9/11 as a $7 billion payout. Okay, so they were complicit in all of that. 9/11 was also how we closed out the Black Merchant, the Black Eagle Trust, which was the $250 billion that Buzzy Krongard was running at CIA from 1998 to 2001 to destroy the Russian economy. We spent $250 billion destroying the Russian economy. Okay, and that was illicit money. That was gold lily money. And then after we had done it, we laundered that money with 9/11 and all those trades that were not. And all the early trading, all the short sales on United, all of that has been traced back to Buzzy Krongard and Brown and Root. But you don't see that in the New York Times. You don't see that in Time magazine. It's part of the rigged deep state. Let me move to another question. She's in charge back there. The lady. If you have the microphone, okay, way in back, and then we'll come forward to you.
I have a very quick question, sir. Could you comment on General Flynn?
On who?
Why that all
Mike
happened?
Flynn. Okay, I know Mike Flynn personally. Mike Flynn is a very decent human being. He can be abrasive at times. I can be also. I suffer idiots very poorly. But Flynn, I think, made a couple of mistakes. He was so intent on cashing in that he took some money and he failed to make full and proper declarations. So I think Flynn hung himself. I, for example, could not be hung the way Flynn has, because I'm purer than Caesar's wife. I declare everything, including my recent meetings in Thailand. And, well, I don't know how pure she was. Maybe it's the wrong analogy. Sorry. But the bottom line is Mike Flynn took a hit because everybody wanted to hit him and because he had made enough procedural errors so that he was hittable. But he's a good man, and Donald Trump is a loyal president, and I think he still takes Mike Flynn's phone calls. Now, this gentleman who's about to ask a question painted the portrait of me, which has my goodness shown, which doesn't happen often. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, Robert. My name is Douglas, and I am doing a series of 100 portraits of whistleblowers and informers. And
No statements.
Robert is part. But anyway, I wanted to mention that this whole system that we live is only as good as its free, honest, and fair open media. And if the media is completely bastardized, and if, you know, this idea of fake news, it is fake news, but it's not for the reasons that Donald Trump
Right, it's
says
deliberate.
fake news. Why don't you ever get, I mean, the third rail of the news is Fukushima or 9/11 or any number of topical things that need to be
Vaccines.
discussed. Everything, right.
Food
But
and
you'll
Drug
never-
Administration.
What reporter can go near this without himself?
Reporting has been destroyed. I mean, Steve Emerson did a great job. He wrote American Jihad. He did a PBS series on Muslim preachers on U.S. soil calling for the murder of Americans in mosques in the United States of America. He was fired by PBS for doing that. I'll tell you what my epiphany, that's the Republican word for aha. My epiphany came when I heard Tom Steyer say he had spent $75 million or $74 million on climate change and got nothing from it. That's the moment when I went from micro to meta. All these issues we talk about, including dishonest media, dishonest academics. I mean, our universities now are crap. It's all adjunct professors who are slaves, basically, to the system with no benefits. All of the jobs that Obama created were part-time jobs with no benefits. I mean, the whole system is rotten. I realize that nothing will be fixed until we do election reform. The meta issue, the core issue in America is election reform. If we can restore integrity to how we elect and how we manage things in Congress. Now, the Republicans are not blameless. Newt Gingrich personally destroyed Congress and destroyed Article 1 of the Constitution when he set out to destroy Speaker Wright and turn all members of Congress into foot soldiers for the two-party tyranny. And that story is told in The Power and the Ambition. I read a lot. I'm the top Amazon reviewer for nonfiction. I read in 98 categories. I've got over 2,300 reviews if Amazon hasn't deleted them. They keep deleting the better older guys so that the young unwashed can rise in the rankings. But all of my reviews are preserved at phibetaiota.net. So let me stop there. This lady is eager to ask a question. Please.
I'm actually eager to ask many questions, but I'll whittle it down to 3. What do you think about the election of Macron in France?
Rigged.
Rothschild bank guy.
Yeah, right.
And what do you think about the under investigated death of Seth Rich?
Yeah, also.
And how do you? I understand what you're saying about 9/11, and it's a big story. But just to whittle that down, what do you think about the Saudis who drove planes?
Most of them were not Saudis. They were using Saudi passports.
You're right.
The Saudis were complicit in covering up the whole thing.
Right, but yeah, could you just say a little bit more?
Well,
about
I mean, Macron was definitely a win by the deep state. And the Netherlands may have been. Part of the problem is that the European populists tend to be a little bit too extreme. They make Donald Trump look conservative, which is hard. But France has lost it. I mean, this man had the audacity to play the European anthem instead of the French anthem. Yeah. Also, you need to understand the European Union was never a union. It's always been a cartel. It's a commercial cartel, by, of, and for the 1%. It started as a steel cartel and then went on from there. And they love Goldman Sachs. They think nothing of destroying the Greek and Spanish and Portuguese and Irish economies. And I would also point out to people that the Iceland got it right. They put their bankers in jail, no problem. And now they have a great credit rating. Okay? So Seth Rich clearly was as an assassination, but it may have been a low-level assassination. Because if I don't assassinate people, but if I were assassinating him, I would have made it look like a robbery. He had everything on him: cell phone, jewelry, cash, wallet, the whole bit. So it was kind of a second-tier assassination. Also, Craig Murray is on the record. Ambassador Craig Murray is on the record as saying that he took documents from a DNC staffer, unnamed, probably Seth Rich. And I think there's many, many more documents yet to be released from that harvest. Also, DNC was partially NSA employees. William Binney, my friend, my counterpart for the NSA. If I'm the top honest former CIA guy, Binney's the top former honest NSA guy. And we both love Judge Napolitano. I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I really am. God, I may have to run with Gary Johnson for office. Any accommodation. 2 old white guys again. No, I'm not going to do it, I promise. Okay. So another question, or do you have a quick follow-up? What did I miss? Shout it out. Oh, okay, Saudis. And Soros, but Saudi. Soros is under a death warrant. I mean, I think Soros knows that he is at severe risk in the United States of America and elsewhere. No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. We have what we call Ranger Justice in the United States of America. Ranger Justice. That's when someone goes so far out in front that people other than myself, I would never do this. But there are people seriously thinking about killing him and Eric Schmidt. Okay. Eric Schmidt is Google Gestapo. Okay. Hashtag Google Gestapo. Eric Schmidt, by the way, is dry running in the United States of America a censorship system he wants to sell to China. So imagine that. Google Gestapo is a practice run, not only to manipulate political stuff and stomp down on Trump supporters and elevate the resistance of people, but he's actually doing it so he can sell it to China and say to communist China, look, Here in the United States, I've developed the perfect censorship system worthy of communist China. How ironic is that? Okay, so over here we had another lady,
Yes, yes.
and then there's a gentleman up here. Yes, the lady.
I'd like your opinion how to reverse the leftist indoctrination going on most colleges and universities, which has deteriorated into a
It
total
has.
lack of any opposing point of view and no more freedom of speech.
Homeschooling comes to mind right away, but part of the problem with homeschooling is you then have to get to a one-income family. You know, one of the things about grand strategy is that it's holistic. You can't solve one problem without solving the other problems. Medard Gabel, who was the #2 assistant to Buckminster Fuller for many years, he runs a design seminar. And people come in there thinking they're going to do a transportation design or an agriculture design or a health design. And at the end of the first week, they have their aha experience, which is you can't do any of that unless you do all of it together from the bottom up. So for me, I am not the guy who has all the answers. What I have is one answer, which is that education and health, the actual core policies are agriculture, diplomacy, economy, education, energy, family, health, immigration, justice, security, society, and water. Those are the 12 core policies that have been in every presidential mandate for change book going back 20 years. What I realized was that we have to put the intelligence of the American people back into the US government. And if you do election reform, I think education and family and all of this other stuff will take care of itself. I'm also huge on state rights. I think that the federal government can be summed up. I don't know how many of you look at all these stupid labels on your mattresses or on your power cords. When I'm doing the lawn for my wife, there's a stupid little label that some moron in Washington said had to be on every power cord sold in the United States of America. I mean, where did they get that kind of power? It's not in the Constitution, thou shalt regulate electrical cords. And it's not even in the Interstate Commerce Clause. So education for me, by the way, is part of a continuum, education, intelligence, and research. And intelligence is actually about decision support. And what I have discovered in the last several decades is that intelligence is also remedial education for policymakers who are very poorly read. Okay? And Donald Trump, for all of his gifts, does not read a lot. He's a Twitter president. And so I think he really needs a trusted source of intelligence. The President's Daily Brief, by the way, is absolute crap. It's 1/2 lies and 1/2 garbage. It's not worth sitting through. The President's Daily Brief, for example, does not distinguish between strategy, regional, tactical, and technical, which is acquisitions. The President's Daily Brief also does not give the President a holistic picture of the whole threat spectrum. Let me just point out to you that the intelligence community only does 2 out of 10 threats. 2 out of the 10 high-level threats to humanity: interstate conflict and terrorism. They ignore, and these threats in this priority order were created by Lieutenant General Brent Scowcroft and the United Nations High-Level Panel for Threats, Challenges, and Change. And yes, I would pull out of the UN and pull out of NATO, but it was a good effort. Poverty is #1. Poverty is the #1 threat. And illegal immigration has a lot to do with the poverty that we have created by funding dictators overseas. We are best pals with 40 of the 42 dictators on the planet. The only 2 we don't like are North Korea and Cuba. And Cuba's a joke. I mean, the Mexican president was asked to declare Cuba a national security threat to Mexico, and he refused. And the president said, "Why?" And he said, "Because if I did that, 40 million Mexicans would die laughing." Okay. So poverty, infectious disease, environmental degradation, interstate conflict, civil war, genocide, other atrocities, including trafficking in women and children, then proliferation, terrorism, and transnational crime. The U.S. intelligence community is absolutely worthless on 8 of the 10 and marginally useful because it's lying to the president on the other 2. So one of the things I would like to do is create an open source agency, which is why I was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, which I don't deserve, but I want to help Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and Modi in India and Xi in China and maybe Duterte who is, we can say, a ballsy guy in New York terms. I love him. I want to help them win the Nobel Peace Prize. Here's the bottom line on this. We can lift up the 5 billion poor with clean energy, water, housing, aquaponics at 10% the cost of what it has cost us. A John Deere tractor costs $200,000, cannot be repaired by the farmer in the field. In fact, the farmers are now suing for right to repair. A John Deere tractor has to be evacuated in a very expensive way in a trailer to the repair facility, and then they make secret software repairs, and then they rent it back to you. An open source tractor, which my friend Marcin Jakubowski has created, open source ecology, global village construction set. He's documented all of these, and I'm trying to get Modi, as well as Putin and Xi, to notice this. He's documented all of this. For 10% of the cost of a John Deere tractor, he can create an equivalent tractor that can be repaired by the farmer in the field with no hidden parts. That's how you lift up the 5 billion poor. I was very impressed by C.K. Prahalad and his book, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. We billion rich, have $1 trillion economy. The 5 billion poor have a $4 trillion economy. But they don't buy Sub-Zero fridges, they buy ceramic jars they bury in the ground that cost $2 and keep meat fresh for $5. So I'll stop there. There's a lot at 58iota.net, and this gentleman here has been waiting patiently.
Just two questions. One is,
can I get a glass of water?
is there a map that you would point us to online, something that shows the hierarchy of all of these layers of Rothschilds and Vaticans and banks? And is there a place where that exists?
The short answer, if you look for a map of each state, you'll probably get to a bunch of different things. I mean, Peter Dale Scott wrote the original book, but I don't think he put enough emphasis. I don't think he put enough emphasis on the Rothschilds and the Vatican.
Okay.
However, there are. I mean, I get hundreds of emails every day, and it's hard for me to deal with most of them because I just don't have the time. But there are a number of people who have devoted their life to researching the Rothschilds and the Vatican. And I am personally satisfied, I'll leave it at this, I'm personally satisfied that there is enough to indict both of them.
Okay.
Not necessarily convict them.
I will do some digging. But the second question is, I read something recently where a lot of the Silicon Valley companies that are creating AI and machine learning and whatnot, they also are donating money to a charity that is investing in countries in Africa where they're creating a test of the basic income, where everybody in a whole city in Africa, for example, is getting the equivalent of $100
And that's a
a
good
day
idea.
for 12 years. Is that something that will...
Well, let me address that at two different levels. Number one, Google Gestapo needs to be crushed.
Absolutely.
So we need a new blockchain alternative to Google and Twitter and Facebook, and we need to have something that cannot be censored. But we also need tools. I mean, Micah Sifry, right here in New York, in Civic Hall, has written an excellent book called The Big Disconnect, Why the Internet Hasn't Fixed Politics Yet. It's an absolutely superb book. At CIA, which has done some good things, a 4-foot-high redhead named Diane Webb designed computer-aided tools for the analysis of S&T in 1985. And we still don't have it today. The reason we don't have it today is because the federal budget is completely fragmented. OMB doesn't manage anything. When I was on the Advanced Information Processing and Analysis Steering Group, which was the national level committee, we did a survey and we found 20 different people spending over $20 million, and back then that was real money, doing a so-called all-source workstation. You don't have the tools today to do pattern analysis, anomaly detection, structured sharing across groups, multilingual translation on the fly, although that's one of the things Google has done well. It's really bad. I mean, Thai Google is an obscenity, and German Google really pisses off the Austrians. So, and French Google, of course, is beyond hope. So you've got all these issues. I think Silicon Valley is now at the end of its useful life. I don't know if crowdfunding is going to rise up and take its place, but I'm very encouraged. Steemit and Patreon and a few other things are starting to emerge. But I actually will say, and I was asked this question in Thailand, I think we need a mix of autocratic leaders. So we need for Xi and Putin and Modi and Duterte and the new Thai king and a few others, we need for them to say, enough. we're going to focus on a post-Western economic, information, and engineering model. And I'm the guy who invented open source everything engineering, which has over 60 elements distilled down into 9 categories. And you can look that up, open source everything engineering, and get right to it. In fact, at 58iota.net, there's an OSEE page that is under construction. So on the one hand, you need the crowd to come up, but part of the problem we have is we're overcoming 30 years of mediocre education and entertainment, and we basically made our public stupid, as well as fat. So we have some real issues here. Who has a microphone?
Over here.
Okay, and 2 microphones here, and then note the lady there, and then this gentleman here. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us
I
tonight.
hope I haven't offended anyone.
So regarding the Truth and Reconciliation, my question is, are the majority of the pedophiles people that have a serious pedophile issue, or are there a lot of these politicians that just have a control file where maybe there was a one-off situation?
Right.
where
That's
they were
a
captured?
wonderful, wonderful question. Thank you. Let me answer that. First off, there's a select segment that absolutely believes that drinking children's blood will keep them younger for a long time. And they're also using these rituals as kind of a Freemasonry. I mean, there's a level of Freemasonry above Freemasonry that is really, truly scary. Okay? Now, then you have a whole level of people like the Dutch banker. There's a wonderful videotape by a Dutch banker in which he talks about this whole system. Okay? And then you have the people that have been coerced. I actually talked to someone who was drawing on personal experience, and they basically described this notional congressman who went to bed very, very drunk with a legal age blonde. Maybe blonde is not germane, but it was a woman, and woke up with a 12-year-old child. Okay, and in the middle there, he was filmed in drunken sex with a 12-year-old child. And so that's how they get them. So it's a brilliant question you've asked, and the reason I like your question so much is because it helps justify the truth and reconciliation approach that I earnestly believe in. Now, there's one other thing I want to say. I want to save all of our members of Congress. Now, we save our members of Congress in 2 ways. The first is we have to free them from their dependence on corporate money, regardless of the source. But the second is many of our congressmen, including explicitly John McCain and Lindsey Graham, are being blackmailed to attack President Donald Trump. Okay? And I was the first one to post that with a staff source. Marco Rubio is a closet gay. He's being blackmailed. John Kasich has his own issues. And so what we have to do is in counterintelligence, we literally call this, taking a page from the Catholic Church, a confession and an absolution. We need to bring all of them in, get a full confession, give them a presidential pardon. A presidential pardon. All is forgiven. And in the process, they help us catch the guys that are blackmailing them. And so we go after the blackmailers, not the victims. So I really believe this truth and reconciliation process is important. Let me take another microphone. You can catch me. I'm staying after for whatever it is that comes
All right,
up.
we'll just take a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
All right.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What do you think about the president's relationship to Roy Cohn in New York City?
who?
Roy Cohn, who's the attorney for the Gambino.
Oh.
That's first question.
I'm from New York. I'll make you a deal.
Yeah, second, yeah,
Everything goes in New York.
so, in that his installment in this position is to create civil divisiveness while to distract us from this municipal bond bubble that's coming in the fall.
That's a good question. I mean, let me say first off, in New York, you deal with everybody, right? So some people you just can't ignore. And Donald Trump is a businessman. And you know what? The other billionaires are laughing at him. Because Trump is making his money on the margins of construction. When the Rothschilds want to make money, they rig the foreign exchange rate or the interest rate. Or they start a war in the Middle East so that the price of oil will go up. Right away, Goldman Sachs made some bad bets on oil. And so Goldman Sachs desperately wants a war in the Middle East.
Is that just part of you don't know who, but in your heart, I mean, this is what.
Look, in my heart, I think Donald Trump tried very, very hard to lose. He did not want to win. He won by accident. I lay this out in a 30-page document with 35 footnotes and 100 links, so I'm not going to repeat all of that here. Now,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, it's the same thing we can't know. The second question is regarding North Korea.
It's not our problem.
Is it possible that that's a kind of a heel state to justify our fleet being in the North China Sea for a war with China that's looming?
No, I don't think we're going to go to war with China. I think the main event, what Dick Cheney wants, is a war in the Middle East. By the way, we could not win a war with China. Chinese diesel submarines are popping up behind American carriers in the middle of a battle group all the time. The Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese all have sunburned missiles that do Mach 2 while zigzagging. We cannot win a war with China or Russia, period.
Third question is just short of any of these leaders being, the second coming, what can we?
No, Donald Trump is the second coming. I mean, I thought I made that clear.
Well, I know so too, but I'm saying what actions can we, the people, like you sometimes
Election
talk about
reform. There is one action you can take. Hashtag UNRIG.
But what about,
period.
What about even further, like say, could we, the people, collectively sue the Fed under class action suit?
They're going to laugh at you.
But no, you can go all the way up to
Look,
the
that's
Supreme
all,
Court.
forgive me, but that's all down in the margins. There is only one thing that will turn this country around, and that's as if every person occupies the front lawns and home offices of every member of Congress this summer and makes it clear to them that, number one, we will relieve them of blackmail and bribery pressures, and number two, we will turn them into a pile of pus if they don't pass the Election Reform Act in September. That's it. That's meta. Everything else is micro.
Okay, next question.
Thanks for coming out. Are you familiar with the Bilderberg Group?
Yes.
They're meeting.
Yes. People on their way down with aspirants on their way up.
Yeah, they're meeting this weekend, or the first weekend of June in Chantilly, Virginia. I just want to know, what do you think is going to be their...
Like the Council on Foreign Relations, a lot of servants. Really, I mean, these are all servants. These are not decision makers. These are pimps for power.
Yeah.
I know. This may not go with the party line here, but what I really have to emphasize, I mean, look at the Atlantic Council. The same week that the White Helmets did their false flag in Syria, the Atlantic Council was glorifying the White Helmets in a conference in Washington. I mean, that's just deep state. Council on Foreign Relations is how the deep state manages the consensus, how it manages the narrative. Okay, so Council on Foreign Relations, New York Times, Washington Post, the Bilderberg Group, Bohemian Grove, where some people, trilateral. I mean, all of this is part of an architecture that manages the narrative. I mean, I forget who wrote Animal Farm, but he got it right. Okay, we're all expendable animals. And what Cynthia McKinney has, I'll tell you a quick story. I wrote a piece for Kindle called Democracy Riots. We're all black now, deal with it. Okay? I've been technically unemployed for 8 years. All right? I lost my company to 3 morons in government who asked me to declare all my foreign contacts, and I declared 7,500, and each of which had a piece of paper on them because I'm meticulous in my documentation. Picture 3 little chimpanzees jumping up in a small room. So I lost my clearances. I got them back. A judge restored them because I was purer than Caesar's. Well, maybe not purer than Caesar's. We're going to have to find another analogy. I'm pure, okay? I cannot be blackmailed. I can be killed. And I'm at a point in my life where I would welcome death. So bottom line here is all of these people are part of this narrative. And the narrative comes from 12 people at the top. And every decision that's made, I mean, the transpartisan partnership was all about subverting sovereign nations to corporations. And the health bill, I mean, Obamacare was just as dishonest as Trump's Ryan's bill, okay? I'm friends with Carl Denninger, one of the greatest Americans we've got, co-founder of the Tea Party, okay? Carl Denninger has written an excellent book called Leverage, and he has written an honest health plan. And if you don't require that the health industry have a price list, and if you don't allow the US government to negotiate it, then you have a dishonest health plan. Now, taxes, tax reform, Trump's tax reform is completely dishonest. It leaves the burden on Main Street. It still does not tax Wall Street currency and stock transactions, which is a huge source of revenue, and it's a fractional thing. Edgar Feige created the automated payment transaction tax, which would also allow us to eliminate the Internal Revenue Service, which together with the Federal Reserve are the two Jekyll and Hyde kind of things that were created to turn all of the American people into slaves. All right, so going back to my we're all black now. My wife gives me room and board, a car to drive, and health insurance, and I have to come up with money from donors for everything else. But before I became popular a few months ago on Alt-Right, I didn't have any money at all, and my zipper broke on my one winter coat. And I said, oh shit, this is what it's like to be black. Only I take a liberty here. But it's like 200 years worth of oppression and not having anything, and you're out of Schlitz. Okay, well, we white people are there. So it's time now for the 99% to come together. And frankly, the next move is yours. Because the alt-right has said yes, and now you guys have to say yes. And if you say yes, then I think we have the makings of going to the Libertarian Party, which desperately needs new management, and the Green Party, which desperately needs new management, and a few others. So next question, last question, what do you want to do, Erica? I'll stay here till 10.
Hi, I was hoping to hear something more specific about a program to, by the way, I'm Spear Larry.